You might be wondering, what is happening at Apple? Just in the last few weeks, Apple lost its chief design executive, Alan Dye. Apple's senior vice president of AI, John Giannandrea, retired. Johnny Srouji, the guy making Apple's incredible silicon, he might be at risk of leaving. And both the Financial Times and Mark Gurman at Bloomberg says that Tim Cook is likely to resign soon. Plus Lisa Jackson, who you've seen in keynotes, retired. Kate Adams, and even Apple's former chief operating officer, Jeff Williams, he's gone too. And if you're just reading the headlines, it might feel like, well, last one out, turn off the lights. But I want to take a deeper look at the people replacing these figures that are leaving, and why I'm actually optimistic about the new the new Apple team that's going to be taking over in the years to come. First, let's talk about Alan Dye, who's been heading up Apple's design for about the last 10 years. He joined Apple in 2006, and you've seen him in keynotes from the Dynamic Island years ago to the big section on liquid glass at DubDub earlier this year. Now, Alan Dye worked on things all the way back to iOS 7 and 8 and the Apple Watch, but Alan Dye's work history feels a little more fashion than tech. Even in this great piece by David Pierce about the Apple Watch, he said that Alan Dye is much more Burberry than BlackBerry. And before Apple, it's not like Alan Dye was working at Google or Microsoft. He worked at Kate Spade, Ogilvy and Mather for a few years, and Landor Associates before that. Now, Alan Dye probably had a hand in a lot of good things at Apple. The Dynamic Island is really cool, and he's been working there a long time. But the latest achievements, let's say liquid glass, it's a little more contentious. It's pretty obvious he's spearheaded liquid glass. He's the one narrating the whole thing during the DubDub keynote. But ever since iOS 26 released, it has mixed reviews. Even in my own iOS 26 review, I feel the design is less consistent than previous years. And if you need both a toggle and a slider to adjust how much glass is in your UI, maybe liquid glass isn't ideal. But I want to focus on who's replacing Alan Dye going forward. It was stated that Apple is replacing Alan Dye with longtime designer Stephen Lemay. And even Tim Cook, in a statement to Bloomberg, said Steve Lemay has played a key role in the design of every major Apple interface since 1999. And while there's not a lot available on what Stephen Lemay might have been responsible for since 1999, I'm excited to have him at the helm designing Apple's UI. So he joined Apple 26 years ago. His LinkedIn is pretty sparse, but in this great article from Cult of Mac, and I'll put this link and everything else down in the description, there's pictures of Stephen Lemay with the original iPhone design team. You'll see this was a picture from Imran Chowdhury posted on Instagram, but there's Stephen Lemay right there, original iPhone team. And here he is again pictured in 2007 with the iPhone launch. While there's not a lot of data or interviews with Stephen Lemay out there, he did a brief interview with St. Paul's School, and he has this little line here. I had an opportunity to study graphic design and create logos for the school bookstore and t-shirts. These product-focused class projects were all about communication and iconography. These are also the foundations of software design. St. Paul's is also where I fell in love with the Mac. I think that last part is important. He fell in love with the Mac first, and user interface is a unique kind of design. Not only does it have to look nice, but it also has to function really well. I think he's going to have a handle on that. Also, several current and former colleagues have been singing Stephen Lemay's praises. Chan on X said, Steve's been my manager for my entire 15-year career so far at Apple, and I could not be more excited for this new era. And former colleague Ben Hilak said, he's the guy you've all been praying for. And there's a screenshot of that St. Paul School interview. And again, because Apple's so secretive, you can't really know what Stephen Lemay was directly responsible for over the last 26 years. You will see a lot of US patents. This one's back in 2009 for an iPod-looking device. And you have Steve Jobs, Scott Forstall, and there's Stephen Lemay right there. And this is one of many patents with Stephen Lemay's name on it. So while Alan Dye might be a high-profile executive leaving Apple for Meta, I think Stephen Lemay is a great replacement, and I'm excited to see what he does going forward. All right, next big position is AI. John Giannandrea, he was shown off when Apple first announced Apple Intelligence. He was on the talk show Live back in 2004, making a lot of promises about personal Siri and the voice assistant. And while this departure doesn't seem as contentious, it seemed like he didn't deliver on the promises of AI and machine learning, and Apple is replacing him with Amar Subramanya. Now, John Giannandrea was at Google before this doing a lot of AI research, and research is great. I'm sure he's a really smart guy, but that might not always translate to actual product delivery and product making. And I think it's universally stood when it comes to Apple Intelligence compared to OpenAI, Perplexity, and Claude. Apple's a little behind on AI, so a changing of this guard might be welcome. Now, Subramanya also came from Google. He spent 16 years there, but he was the head of engineering for the Gemini Assistant. Now, we've talked about Gemini and Gemini 3 Pro on Primary Technology. That's my tech podcast, by the way. You can listen up here or links below. And Google Gemini has really improved, so much so that OpenAI issued a code red, and Sam Altman saying, we need to improve ChatGPT because Google Gemini is catching up. So if the guy that worked on Gemini for a decade and a half is going to be in charge of AI at Apple, I think that's a good sign too. Now, before we get to Tim Cook and whether or not he's leaving, there is one wild card, which is Johnny Srouji. He's the guy in the basement of Apple making all the chips. You've seen him in lots of keynotes. And Mark Gurman said that he's at risk of leaving. Oh, breaking news just this morning, Mark Gurman reported, seemingly counter than what he said just a few days ago, that Johnny Cerrugi is here to stay. He talked to his team, and he's in it for the long haul. So great news. And that's in addition to all the other great leadership still at Apple. Craig Federighi, Air Force One, the GOAT, he is still at Apple. Eddie Q, leading the services. He's the one that probably landed that F1 deal. All the Apple sports that's been happening the last couple of years, Eddie Q's still there. Greg Joswiak over marketing. Sabi Khan, who's taken over the Chief Operating Officer. There's a lot of great people still at Apple. But what about the top spot? If Tim Cook retires, who takes over? Now, the Financial Times had a report that Apple is intensifying succession planning, saying Tim Cook might resign even in the next 6 months. Now, Mark Gurman at Bloomberg kind of poo-pooed that and say, no, he'll be around for a little while longer, but could still resign in 2026, which still feels pretty soon. But who's likely to take over for Tim Cook? Well, that's John Ternus. John Ternus is 50 years old, the same age Tim Cook was when he took over as CEO of Apple. There's a great profile piece here that I'll link in the video description. But you've seen John Ternus in a ton of Apple keynotes. He joined Apple back in 2001. He studied mechanical engineering, graduated in '97. He worked as a mechanical engineer at Virtual Research Systems, a company focused on virtual reality technologies. Might be good experience as we head into the next phase of technology, VR and AR. He even designed headsets for simulation systems and gained hands-on experience with emerging human interface technologies. And he became the VP of hardware engineering over Mac, iPad, and AirPods in 2013. He then assumed control of iPhone hardware engineering in 2020, and in 2021, Apple promoted him to Senior Vice President of Hardware Engineering, making him the top exec over hardware teams for iPhone, iPad, Mac, and AirPods. Wired also has a great article talking about John Ternus and the other new generation of leaders taking over at Apple. And while John Ternus might seem like the safe choice, that he's been at Apple a long time, he's well acquainted with the culture and the products. The few times I've seen John Ternus in keynotes, it does feel like he's a little more product-minded, and there's been a lot of talk about product CEO versus Tim Cook, who's been a real chief operating officer type CEO. That's the position he held before CEO. I think John Ternus would be a great change of pace and pushing forward in product design, trying new things. Time will tell, but John Ternus plus designers like Stephen Lemay, Amar Subramanya taking over Apple Intelligence, not to mention others that are part of the industrial design team like Molly Anderson. Seems like she's been at Apple for almost 10 years and her name is on a lot of patents. You'll see Molly Anderson right here. Seems like she's been on a lot of iPhone-looking patents. And so while it felt a little bit like the sky was falling for a few weeks there, I think this new the new Apple team that we're going to have going into the next decade, I'm excited about what they bring to the table. And it seems like people at Apple and previously at Apple who actually know the people taking over, they're excited too. And also don't forget, while a lot of the top leaders might be shifting and changing, there's a lot of people at Apple. I love this headline from William Gallagher, friend from Apple Insider. Dozens of staffers quit Apple, leaving behind only 164,000. Apple's a big company. And I was actually at WWDC earlier this year, and I got to meet a lot of the people that work on the products you use every day. I got to meet those on the Shortcuts team and others, iOS, who love what they do, love making great products and great software for you to use on your iPhone, your iPad, and all your devices. So there's a lot of people at Apple doing incredible work, and there's been a lot of hands even in the software and hardware that you are holding today. So there might be some big names shifting, leaving Apple, even all the way up to the CEO, but I'm actually excited to see this next phase of Apple. But let me know what you think down in the comments, and let me know if you like this kind of video where I'm explaining the news, kind of talking in depth a little more. If you like that, let me know. Get subscribed and hit that like button. If you want to see my latest roundup of Apple Intelligence shortcuts, you can check that video out right up here, or the latest features in iOS 26.2. While Liquid Glass aside, there are some awesome features there. Check out my video right up here. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.